We have been talking about the two offices of the church. There are two groups of people who have the leadership of the church. One is the eldership and one is the deacons. So when we bring them together, we have the leadership of the church. So two of them, the elders and the deacons, they have what we call separate offices. To be sure about this, let's open our Bibles at Hebrews 13. Hebrews 13, and we have verse 7 as the first one. Remember your leaders. And again in verse 17, it says, have confidence in your leaders and submit to their authority. So we have leadership at different levels, and we have leadership specifically called leaders. It's kind of difficult to say whether they are absolute leaders, whether they have authority over everything, or having authority only over certain things. We talked about before, and we just going to touch it again on this issue of what an elder has to do, what a deacon has to do. And you may say, well, I heard this before. Well, we are using what is called the Coca-Cola effect. Coca-Cola was completely unknown when they started out as a firm. And then the thing they did was talking about it and talking about it and talking about it, advertising, making people know, asking the different stores to buy and to sell. And they were doing that, and they are still doing that. So that is an ongoing thing they are doing. Over the years, almost everyone in the world know the word Coca-Cola. There are people say, I don't know whether it's true, but people say there are two words that are famous all over the world. That is hallelujah and Coca-Cola. So at least they are doing a good job. And they have as aim, the goal is to reach everyone with Coca-Cola. And I think that's a good idea for us. We can learn something from them to do the same thing, to reach out to everyone in the world. That is something we have to do as a church, a whole. Locally, you cannot do that. I always have a problem with the vision of certain churches. They call it the vision of the church. And then they say, we are using Matthew 28, verses 18 to 20. We are going to reach the whole world. Excuse me. That's not for a local church. The local church has to reach out to the people around them. When they do that, they are doing a good job. And when they send out missionaries, that is fine too. But let them work with local churches in the other countries and do the same thing over there. Instead of saying that we are reaching everyone, if all the churches are reaching out to the people around them, we will very easily reach the whole world, even in this generation. So that is not the issue. The issue is that we have leadership, called leaders in our Bibles, and there are two levels, the elders and the deacons, and there is no other leadership given. And we will come back to this specific issue again. But please, take into consideration what we have seen, that leadership is given, is not something that is taken up by someone saying, oh, now I am a leader. No. Leadership is given by God. The Lord Jesus showed how leadership functions. How does leadership function? Well, very simple. You be involved. If you're not involved in leadership, I mean, if you call yourself a leader, but you're not involved in a local church or working together with other Christians, how can you be a leader? You can only be a leader if you have followers. That's what a leader means. Someone who is in front of all the rest, taking the others with him to do certain things which are described in our in the New Testament, in our Bibles, as a certain thing we have to do, and that is specifically leadership of a church. Means the leadership of a group of people, a congregation, has to have certain leadership. And you can find that in 1 Corinthians 14, how it is explained there. That's the idea of the Apostle Paul. But the leaders themselves, the ones we know of, both the elders and the deacons, they have what we call qualifications. And we talked about that before, but just to remind you, that's the Coca-Cola effect. Remember we talked about 1 Timothy 3, the verses 1 to 7, and Titus 1, the verse 5 to 9. So we can talk about what an elder must be, and yes, we talked about like above reproach and temperate and prudent, respectable, and so on. And remember we talked about the fact that elders and deacons have almost the same qualifications, or they need the same qualifications, except for the elders, they have to be able to teach. So when you look at the two offices in the church, we are talking about two separate things. The elders, they are more or less the people who follow the apostles. And the apostles in Acts 6 were the ones who were bringing the word of God. They would have prayer things. They would have, in a spiritual way, things to do. And the deacons, the ones who are called deacons, and the ones who are chosen by the local congregation and accepted by that local congregation, and there you find they have to do other things. So I'm not saying they don't have to be spiritual, because they have to be spiritual, but the other thing they have to do is in the practical. They have to work there. For example, in the book of Acts, it's the distribution of the food to the poor people. In today's situation, we can say they would do a ministry among the poor people. That is what deacons are doing. But other things too, like cleaning the church, organizing the barbecues. That depends, of course, if you have a barbecue. Otherwise, you can't organize one. If you don't have one, you can buy one, or you can just look forward to fellowship. And I think that is the most important issue. That is that we have fellowship with the elders, with the deacons, and with the local membership. Bringing them together, a spiritual level for the elders, a material level for the deacons, and then we will see that there is one more group that is not being mentioned here. And we are going to talk about that later on. But keep in mind, members and members, it has to be two different things. Okay, so we have the qualifications of an elder or a deacon, but you also have the function. So the elder is the shepherd, the one who takes care of the sheep. Even in the natural world, when you speak about the shepherd, automatically you think about sheep. Well, sheep has to be tended, so we need to make sure that sheep have everything they need. I mean, they need food, they need to reproduce, but they also they need shelter. Sometimes you need to go with this flock of sheep from one place to another. And one of the most famous texts speaking about it is, of course, Psalm 23, speaking about the shepherd. And of course, unless you know it by heart, which would be not impossible to do because it's only 6 verses long, but let's read it. And just think about, remember we talked about the word Lord? There are two different kinds. We have the Lord as Yahweh, and we have the Lord as a local Lord, a person who is the boss in a certain area. So the Lord, which is Yahweh, the Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. That's to do for the church leadership, to make sure that there is a green pasture, a place where you can be quiet. He leads me beside quiet waters, not rushing waters, because it's difficult and it's dangerous, specifically for sheep. Because if they get wet and go into the water, the only thing they can do is drowning, and that's not what we are looking for. So he refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right path for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil. For you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord, again, Yahweh, forever. So we were talking about the function of the elders. We remember it's the shepherd as such, and he takes care of the sheep. That is not in a denigrating way looking down to the other people, but that is because sheep need to be led. And that's why we need a shepherd. And in Psalm 23 we see that the Lord Yahweh is the shepherd. Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. So if he is the good shepherd, and he is the shepherd over everyone else, so we have one shepherd. There's no two different shepherds. There is someone who claims to be the shepherd. He lives in Rome, but he's not the shepherd. The shepherd is the Lord Jesus himself. And then you have, at the level of the local church, you have also the shepherd. And the shepherd is the person who is in charge, the one who leads the flock. And some people say there's only one shepherd for a flock. No way. No way. Even in the natural world, you will see that there are a number of shepherds taking care of one flock. And the same thing happens in the church. By the way, elders, it's not just elder, it's elders. Most of the time it's being used in the plural form. And when you look at the book of Acts, and you go through it and you find the word elder, it's most of the time in plural. And especially when you see, for example, chapter 13 verse 1, it speaks clearly about the multiple group, a group of people who are the eldership, the people in charge, and they have different tasks to do. We will go into the different tasks later on again. So we have it for the elders, which are doing a shepherd job, which are, you can almost say they are like a father to their children, or a shepherd to the flock. It's similar to that. You can take it as a figure that is a system that is being used in the Bible. You find it in 1 Timothy 3 verse 5. But also in Luke 10:35. So the church needs leadership, and the elders are to lead. Of course, when you have a group of people coming together, even a group like 5 people, for example in Acts you have them, 5 people together, being the leadership of the church, having this eldership as a group of people who are in charge, even there, automatically, one person comes up as the leader of the leaders. That's not a bad thing, that's a good thing, as long as you take it in a servant type of way. But not in, I'm the one who speaks, and I'm the final authority, because the final authority is only the Bible. It's never a person. Although, remember what I read in chapter 13, verse 17 of the book of Hebrews, have confidence in your leaders and submit to their authority, because they keep watch over you as those who must give an account. The reason why they watch over you and why they have a certain authority is that they have to do exactly the good things, because they are accountable. As you are accountable to each other and to the leadership, they are accountable to God for what they are doing, what they are saying, what they are bringing. So, verse 17 goes on, do this so that their work will be a joy, not a burden. For that would be of no benefit to you. So you will actually gain when you do that. They will gain when they do that. So everyone is good, everyone is happy, everyone is being filled with joy because of it. And I think that is important for us as individual members of a church, that we not only look up to the elders because they have a very specific task to do. Sometimes they are doing a good job, some may not doing a good job. That is something that is very difficult to say from the outside. But when you are inside, you can actually steer the elders in the right direction. You need encouragement, but they need encouragement. So when you encourage them in the positive way, you can steer them to do the good thing. So it's not just praying for them, because I think that is automatically something you have to do, both for the elders and the deacons, but you can also steer them. So pray and steer. Don't be afraid. As far as I know, none of the elders are cannibals, so they will not eat you. And if they were cannibals and eat you, well, then they eat their own church. So I don't think that would be they would not be a good manager of the household if they take away people. It would be a good thing to help and steer, to pray for, so that everyone is gaining. Whether the elders are doing a good job, it will go over and spill over to the deacons. And the deacons and the elders doing a good job, it spills over to the local church. When the local church is doing a good thing, it spills over to the elders and to the deacons. So it works together. Both have a different thing to do. Spiritual, natural. You can almost say the first group is preaching and the second group is ministering. But yeah, even a minister today is most of the time is being an elder himself. So let us say it this way: the biblical pattern of leadership is for the good of not just for the people themselves, but it's for the good of the whole church, the whole group, the whole congregation. 2 levels, but still things have to be done in a certain way. For example, let's look at Acts 20. Luke is writing about something that happened to Paul. Paul is meeting the people from the Ephesian church. There were problems in Ephesus because the way the church was behaving. Not so much the church was in the wrong, but the people around them could not figure out what the church actually was doing. And so they thought they were actually taking away their livelihood by preaching against certain things that happen in society. If it happens in that time, it can happen today. I remember I was, after a church meeting where I preached, someone came to me and said, I'm very upset with what you said. And the only thing I was talking about in the sermon that could have been related to that person was that I said, you have to be honest in your business. Why would you play music in your shop if you don't sell music? Well, it's to make people stay. Why do you want to have people staying? Well, then they buy more. That's exactly what I'm talking about. That should not be. When someone comes in a shop and you know that person needs a hat, don't sell them 2 hats, because that's unfair. That's not a good thing to do. That may be a good thing for your business, but ethically it's not right. So in church, you can have these things even today. The problems we are facing in Ephesus in the chapters 19 and 20. And so we see that God is actually using Paul and his, let me say, his band of disciples to reach out to the people at that time. And some people were happy and some people were not really happy. But when Paul, he knew that he was going to die and he was not going to return to Ephesus, he meets with a group of people. And we can find that in Acts 20 verse 13. And it says the following: we went on ahead to the ship and sailed to Assos, where we were going to take Paul aboard. He had made these arrangements because he was going there on foot. I don't know exactly why is this written this way. So seemingly there's a system of traveling being explained here. When he met us at Assos, we took him aboard and went to Mytilene. The next day we set sail from there and arrived in Chios. The day after we crossed to Samos, and the following day we arrived at Miletus. Paul had decided to sail past Ephesus to avoid spending time in the province of Asia, for he was in a hurry to reach Jerusalem, and if possible before the day of Pentecost. So from Miletus he sent to Ephesus for the elders of the church. Again, it's elders in plural. So it is saying that he is not just asking the elder of the church that he would come and do certain things. No, he met the group of elders. So the leadership of that church was clearly in plural. We know of the church of Ephesus. Ephesus was a main city where they had a big temple. And around the temple, you had what is called freedom of religion. So when you had this, in that area, if you had a building, you could have, you could preach whatever you wanted. So that's what the church was doing. So they had a building in that area. But outside of Ephesus itself, they went to different places and established local churches who were working together with the church in Ephesus itself. And actually the whole area was called Ephesus. It is similar to other cities in the world today. When you say we are in Antwerp, actually I'm in Hemixum today and I'm not in Antwerp, but we still will talk about Antwerp. Where I live in Merksem, which is part of Antwerp. Well, what is part of Antwerp? So we have churches there too. So in different places around a center, you have different churches, and they come together. In that case, it was around Ephesus, and the people, the leaderships of the different people, of the different churches, congregations, they came together and met with Paul. so they had a good talk, and of course then they had, well, they had to say goodbye, which was not a happy thing. So the biblical pattern is plurality in leadership. You don't have a one-man leadership. You have a plurality in the sense that you have different people coming together, being the leadership of the church. And like I said before, there are two groups, two levels, and you need them to talk to the people and to do the things for the people which they think is needed. And of course, in different churches, you have different emphases and you have different ways of doing things. When you have different languages, when you have different cultures, so you have to abide by all those things around the church, because otherwise you're going to push things through the throat of the people, saying you need to do this according to someone far away, and he thinks he knows. So the leadership has to be local and has to be plural. And then you have a local church with overseers, with deacons, with a membership. So there is a spiritual part, there is a material part, there's a congregational rule. For example, in Act 6 you find that the congregation is actually choosing the people who are going to be the deacons of the church. It is not the 12 apostles who said, okay, now we have so many people and so you have to... No. And then look at it. When you read chapter 6 of Acts, you will find that something very special happened. It was not the majority of the people who were complaining. It was a minority. It was the Greek-speaking minority who was complaining about the way they were treated. So they were Greek-speaking. And what do you see? Look at the names of the people being mentioned. Those 7 names are all Greek names. So the problem was solved by themselves. So you have a group of complainers, and out of that group of complainers, 7 people came, or at least from the same general group as such of the Greek-speaking people, 7 people were chosen to become the deacons of that church, and they were serving not just the Greek-speaking, but also the Hebrew-speaking. Maybe even other languages were spoken. Anyway, so you have the way problems are solved. They are solved in a different way than the world is doing. The world will say, okay, what is the majority? Okay, the majority rule is, okay, we have the Hebrews, they are the majority, so they will tell. No, you can't do that. Spiritually spoken, you don't do that, because you take care of the individual need of the individual people. And that individual need was that they needed Greek-speaking people to help them, to understand. So, let's say it this way, as a summary on this, okay? Elders lead, deacons serve. So that is a comprised version, condensed version of what I was saying the last hours. So please, it's elders lead, deacons serve, and then you have the congregation. What was the qualifications they were looking for in Act 6? We have a saying that you have to be handy to do certain things in the material world. You have to work with your hands to be able to do so. But that is not even mentioned in the qualifications. Nowhere do you find it in the book of Acts that this one needs to be handy. They needed to be what? Godly people, but not handy people. They needed to have a certain background. They didn't go to a technical school to become technicians, and then in the church, no. It can be just the opposite. Someone with a technical background can be elder of the church. Although he is handy, he's using his spiritual gifts to lead the church, not the natural talents. So, you have these different types, you have the different things they have to do, but remember, it's the congregation who decides. It's not the leadership in Rome, or the leadership in Geneva, or the leadership in Colombo. No, it's the leadership locally that decides what to do and how to do it. Because they are, except for the Bible, except for God, you can almost say they are the final authority in those matters. So when you are an Anglican or Roman Catholic, you may think, oh no, I mean this is done according to the church directions, and the church will define. Well, I have a definition, and it's called the Bible. And the Bible is the authority over everyone else. So when you have pastors and when you have elders, and some people will call them, some will call some of the elders bishops, that's fine, as long as they don't think that they have a higher level of authority than the elders or the other elders have. Because the eldership is one in line. They have different things to do, but they are equal. The same thing with the deacons. They have different things to do, but they are equal deacons. So even the overseers, that's the Greek word for, I mean in Greek that is the word what we call overseer, which is, you can translate as manager, but it's more like an oversight over the local church. It's not an oversight over different churches. Okay. There are no less than 5 different elders. I think that is important to understand, that they have different tasks to do, but they are on the same line. Okay, let's look at it. You have the first word that being used, and you go to Matthew 26. Matthew 26, verse 59. That's one of those extremely large chapters in the Bible, and especially in the New Testament. Verse 59, the chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for false evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death. Okay, so the whole Sanhedrin and the chief priests. Okay, why do you say it has to do with the elders? Well, the elders are actually there. They are called, in other places, they are called the elders of the Sanhedrin. So you have, in the Sanhedrin, you have the priests, and you have the high priest, and then you have the elders. Of course, you have different fractions. You have the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the Essenes and the Herodians, and so on. But they already had that type of leadership, except they chose among themselves one person who was higher. That was the high priest. But that was a totally different system as in the New Testament being used for the church. But look at it, it speaks about the chief priest and the whole Sanhedrin. So the whole of them came together. And the elders in that Sanhedrin, they were called, they were looking or thinking about that they were more than the others. Okay, and then you had Mark 11. Mark 11, the verse 27. They arrived again in Jerusalem, and while Jesus walked in the temple court, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders came to him. So here you have the separation of what we didn't see in Matthew 26. Here you see the different groups. So you have the high priest, the priests, the teachers of the law, and then you have the elders. Again, the elders is the same word that's being used for the Christian elders. But, okay. The word that's being used here is presbyteros. Okay, and presbyteros also has a different meaning. It's not only elders or eldership. It is also, and you find that in Luke, I think it's Luke 15. Luke 15, let me see. Verse 25. And again, the same words being used. And strangely enough, in Luke 15:25, you have, meanwhile, the older son was in the field. And again, the same word is being used, the presbyteros. So in some cases, it is not a description of a person in charge in a church or in a synagogue, but it's also being used to explain the situation in a family. So you have the eldest son. Remember, the eldest son is the one who is inheriting twice as much as the other children in the family. Well, the boys in the family, in Jewish tradition. In Acts 14, and we touched on that before, but let's go again. Acts 14:23. It says the following: Paul and Barnabas appointed elders for them in each church, and so on. Okay? So, by the way, when you look at what happened to Paul and Barnabas, when you look at at what is said about them, you will see that in some cases Paul is mentioned first, in other cases Barnabas is mentioned first. Just an oversight about this. Okay, you have 13 verse 7 talking about Acts. You have Barnabas and Saul. In 13 verse 43 you have Paul and Barnabas. In 13 verse 46 you have Paul and Barnabas. In 14 verse 12 and 14 you have Barnabas and Paul. In 15 you have Paul and Barnabas. So seemingly the one who is taking the lead is being mentioned first. And that leadership was not completely in all the cases, in the sense that it was not one leader and the other one was the helper. No, it depends on what was happening. So one time it's Saul, one time it's Paul, same person but a different name, and then you have Barnabas. So in generally spoken, the one who is in charge is the one is mentioned first. So that is what we see here. Okay, so we have another verse in Revelation 4 verse 4 speak about the different elders. Let's read it. Surrounding the throne are 24 other thrones, and seated on them were 24 elders. 24 elders. What are 24 elders? What are they standing for? Well, of course you can have explanation about this and that. You can say, oh, some people say that it's 12 elders as the 12 tribes in Judaism, and you have 12 apostles in the New Testament. So 12 there and 12 there, you have 24. But it's not mentioned here. They are not speaking about the 12 tribes and the 12 apostles. No, they are talking about 24 elders. They were dressed in white and had crowns of gold on their heads. So something special about him. For the throne from the throne came flashes of lightning, rumble and peals of thunder. In front of the throne 7 lamps were blazing, and there were 7 spirits of God. And in front of the throne there was what looked like a sea of glass, clear as crystal. So what we see here is that we have something mentioned, but it's not explained. And you can give different explanations, and that's all fine, but there is no specific meaning explained in the book itself. And that is one of the, what we call hermeneutical rules of doing explanation. When you do exegesis and you try to explain every word and everything that's that's happened in that verse or in that specific passage, one of the things you do is you look for the same author. In this case, in the book of Revelation, by extension to his letters and of course the gospel. But there's no explanation found. And when you don't find it with the same author, you go to other authors, which are Peter, Paul, James. So they don't talk about it. So if they don't talk about it, we just have to say, okay, fine, we don't know. And I think that is a proper thing to do. Sometimes we have to say, we don't know. And that is a good thing. Okay. Other uses of the word presbyteros, the ones who are taking oversight, is, for example, in 1 Peter 5 verse 1, 1 Peter 5 verse 4, James 5 verse 14. The elders among you, subject to the elders, James speaks about the elders of the church. So what we have is, we have elders, older people, the oldest people. By the way, you also have them both in male and female. But we have seen that it's not just limited to a church or a synagogue, but it's also being used for the eldest son. In 1 Timothy 5 verse 2, you can see that there are spoken about female elders. So that's the first group, the older people. Male, female, older son. And then you have what is called the Episcopals, and we talked about the bishop before. It's mentioned 5 times in the New Testament, and it speaks specifically about the one who are overseers. So the oldest are the oldest, the presbyteros, and then you have the overseers. In Acts 20 verse 28, you find the text speaking about the overseers. And it's always good to think about that, what we see or what we think is being said, but then look at what the Bible itself gives us as an explanation. So Acts 20 verse 28, and it says, keep watch over yourself and all the flock of which the Holy Spirit has made you overseers. Listen, be shepherds of the church of God. So you have the overseers being shepherds of the flock, the same people. So the Episcopals, bishop, or the one who is have oversight, is also the shepherd of the flock. The shepherd, that is something some people told me. You don't find the word pastor in the New Testament. Yes, you do, and we will talk about it in a minute. But here we have the Episcopals, the overseers. They are mentioned, like I said, 5 times. One is the book of Acts. Second would be Philippians 1 verse 1. 1 Timothy 3 verse 1 and 2. Titus 1 verse 7. 1 Peter 2 verse 25. The last verse, 1 Peter 2 verse 25, is actually speaking about Jesus being the shepherd and overseer of our souls. That's what I told you before, that he is the one in charge, and he is the one in leadership. Like I said, here in Acts we find a combination. Sometimes the combination is between elders and Episcopals, the same function as elders, but a different task to fulfill. Elders have oversight over believers. That is what the word itself means. They lead, and you find it in 1 Timothy 5:17. They are reliable, Titus 1 verse 7. They undertake financial matters, and that's chapter 1 verse 29 and 30.